I was reading the state of email security report from Mimecast this morning, and it stated that email is the number one attack plane for assailants. It stated that 97% of companies were targeted by email based phishing attacks in 2023. Now, that stat definitely catches my attention. But as a customer, should I be concerned about email security? Shouldn't I be more worried about securing my clients and servers instead? I wanted your thoughts on that. Uh, Kevin, do you want to take that first?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to for him. So, yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, right? If you're a ne'er do well out there on the internet looking to exploit folks, take advantage of folks, get into things to which you shouldn't have access, you're going to attack people where they are, right? So, what is more universal out there in the technology space than email? In some capacity, every single person uses email in the course of transacting their daily business. So it certainly makes sense that it is one of the most, if not the single most targeted threat vector for attacks coming into most organizations. So I think it's a very fair question that, look, a lot of the conversation that we have in general in the industry when we talk about security is around things like, managed detection and response, endpoint detection and response, antivirus software, um, different ways of ensuring that our client computing solutions are safe, our server environment and infrastructure is safe, we're doing things like business continuity, we have a layered approach to how we secure everything. But one thing that I think does get neglected sometimes in that conversation is making sure that the tip of the iceberg, right, making sure that email is also protected. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's not an either or proposition. And we want to make sure that in the course of those larger defense in-depth discussions that tend to happen, email security is certainly something that warrants significant consideration and conversation, if not planning, as to how we're going to deliver those types of security features for our customers. So I'll stop talking though. But Scott, I don't know if you maybe had anything you would want to add there, or if you're kind of in agreement with that, or am I
Oh, I
totally
totally
off the mark?
agree. Agree with what you're saying in terms of the attack vector. The number one common thread amongst all companies and businesses is email. And add to that, I think, is the human element, which is often overlooked. We tend to rely on the software or the security tools, if you will, to handle the work. But these bad actors out there are aware of that, and so they get into the very tricky game of manipulating human sentiment, human behavior, and to that point, most often once you get a breach in there, you're looking at passing that uh, you're looking at passing that around to the rest of your organization if you're not totally secure, right? That's just one of those big inherent risks of, hey, I got an email, Kevin, I thought this looked pretty good, I'm going to send it on over to you. Now two people are infected, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a big problem that could spread quick like a wildfire if you're not securing email on its own.
Well, I think it's also easy for us to think about this in terms of where things were 10 years, 12 years, even 15 years ago, where it's like, oh wow, like you fell for a spam attack or a phishing attack, or we have this maybe psychological view of it where it's like, whoa, man, you really must have missed the mark and done something stupid to fall victim to that. And in reality, the attacks have just gotten so much more sophisticated than they used to be. So we're very reactionary when we think about security in general, and I think that it's very easy to think about the 80% of the things that easily get filtered out, and not the 20% of things that were highly sophisticated attacks that preyed on specific individuals or specific circumstances that were then able to effectively exploit organizations through that means.
Yeah, and that's one of the nice things about Mimecast is it's constantly learning, right? It's gathering up that intelligence on a daily basis where there's millions and millions of factors that are being added into their what to look for, uh, uh, software, right? So from that standpoint, having somebody like a Mimecast that's paying attention to all those little ins and outs with where the industry is focused, right? To your point earlier, hey, basic spam type of click this link and we're in, right? That's no longer the case. There's embedded single pixels in emails that they're hoping that you don't delete, right? That then would become a new attack vector. So the enhancement of the attacks have become very subtle, very minute, very discreet. And a trained human eye can't pick up a spam email like they used to, right? You'd see the old, well, that doesn't look like from at Microsoft. But I think they transposed a word. Well, they're hoping you're not picking up on that little kind of stuff, right? Well, now you can't get away with that.
So let's talk about that a little bit, right? When it comes to all these existing providers and tools that everybody uses, like Microsoft 365, Google Workspace apps, doesn't that already cover all of the features that Mimecast provides, or what more does Mimecast have to offer, or why Mimecast over all the existing apps or tools that customers already have?
No, I think you're going back to the monolithic, I'm working with a Google or a Microsoft or, AWS, right? Well, these guys have to have my back covered. And more often the case is they have a product that addresses some of it, but that's not their only specialization. And so with that, you've got to pay attention to the details of what is being protected, what's your responsibility to configure, look after, and maintain versus what is on the tooling specialist. In this case, right, the way that we deploy email, which is tailored to how our customers need that to be, we can then leverage tailored protection from a product like Mimecast, where we can look at different grades of protection depending on what their requirements are and layer that on top. With Microsoft, we've seen, in fact, Mimecast has pointed out some of the attack vectors are coming right out of Microsoft domains and their own IP space. They've seen I think it's well over 300% year over year increase in that type of activity. So, again, going back to, hey, here's Microsoft, where we should be able to trust these guys. These hyperscalers have this down pat. Well, that's a great example of, stuff that was caught by a Mimecast coming out of a Mimecast security product specific for email protection. So I think we're in the right wheelhouse when we're looking at and using a company like Mimecast because of those extra capabilities. It is their bread and butter. It's how they started, and it's who they still are today.
20% of inbound malware originated from legitimate Microsoft 365 tenants in 2023.
Yeah.
And I think Mimecast has AI-powered dynamic file analysis that helps overcome some of these challenges. Kevin,
Yeah,
is there anything else that you wanted to add as to if someone already has Microsoft 365 Google Apps or a third party for email security? Doesn't that cover all the features that they would need? Like why should they need Mimecast or email protection from Evolve IP?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Why work with a tool like a Mimecast that quote unquote specializes in doing email security versus assuming whatever you have from the provider, whether that's Microsoft, Google, someone else. And again, not to cast aspersions on those specifically. This is true of any provider out there, but whatever built-in tools that they have. And I think Scott nailed it right with the points that he made. And maybe just to put it in other terms, to be a little bit less technical, think about it as the equivalent of like the medical field, right? If there's something wrong with you, you go to a doctor, you go to your primary care provider, right? Your general physician, who it might be an internist, it might be like a general practitioner. If there's something wrong with your lungs, is that doctor going to be able to help you? Yeah, probably, but you probably also want to go see a pulmonologist too, right? Who specializes specifically in the thing that is ailing you. So in this case, just put that in technical terms, right? Like, yeah, Microsoft, Google, they're email providers. They're great email providers, right? Their service is impeccable from an SLA perspective, from an uptime perspective, in terms of reliability of their ability to send, receive messages. In many cases, the tools that they do have are adequate. But if you really want to have that level of specialization, that level of being able to get in there and very granularly determine what kind of policies you want to have for the types of traffic that you want to allow to both ingress, so come into, and egress, go out from your organization, then yeah, you really do want to work with a tool that specializes specifically in that field. that doesn't have the distraction of also being, a hosting provider and a desktop provider and an antivirus provider and all the other things that these organizations do that might detract from their individualized focus on just messaging and email security.
And that's why we want to work with a company like Mimecast, right? It is that specialization. In the world of email, filtering, continuity, archiving, encryption, those are all important aspects of email and to which they pay a lot of attention to. And as our customers work with us and rely on us to provide a solid suggestion for guidance on these topics, we're going to lead with our best foot forward on Mimecast, right? That business relationship, that partnership to guide somebody in the right direction from a cost and effectiveness standpoint is part of the commitment that we make working together. And so, it's incumbent on us to really look at what would be a best option.
I think there's a benefit as well in platform differentiation too, right? So not just in terms of the area of focus of the provider who's offering the service. So, Mimecast being a security focused provider as opposed to Microsoft being an email service, focused email provider. But we all know the old adage, right? You don't want the fox watching the hen house, but you also sometimes don't want the hens watching the hen house either. So I think there is a real benefit to having a third party that's layered in there that has no vested interest in the underlying platform themselves, aside from ensuring that everything that's coming into and going out of that solution is secure the way that you want it to be. Another huge consideration that goes into that is messaging platform continuity too, right? Because when we talk about, and you'll hear these words come from me at least a lot today, right? Defense in depth. When we talk about a defense in depth strategy, we're talking about everything from the outside in, right? So how we protect stuff that's coming into and leaving our organizations, all the way down to how we provide any virus for our systems, both proactive and reactive, how we recover, how we back up, how we have business continuity. Well, we always think about business continuity in terms of servers, right? We always think about it in terms of applications with SaaS-based apps. We very often think of it in terms of end-user computing. One area where business continuity conversations don't really come up that often naturally is when we're talking about things like email, right? Because again, it's this just universal thing. It's just like, turning on the faucet and expecting water to come out, or plugging something into an outlet and you just expect the power to be there, right? Email is universal. It's always there. It's always working. But what happens if you're a Microsoft 365 email customer and Microsoft has an outage? Well, you can't send and receive messages for the duration of that outage until it's fixed. Now, if you work with a solution like Mimecast, right? So Mimecast has a messaging continuity feature in several of their packaged bundles, which actually allows a user to continue to receive incoming messages and send messaging out from their email account, even if Microsoft themselves were down. So that ability to really kind of seamlessly flow through those things. Again, when we talk about security and defense in depth, not just the ability to protect from an issue happening, right, is part of the consideration, but also the ability to recover if that protection proved inadequate and an issue happened anyway. So if you had that email outage, that ability to have that continuity of, hey, look, even if Microsoft's down, even if Google is down, guess what? My users can still send and receive mail without any impact to their performance or capabilities. That's a huge piece of this as well.
The enhancement and the evolution of the attacks has marched forward ever since we started working with Mimecast. They too have addressed those with a litany of new products related to those advanced attack vectors. For instance, they have a product to monitor someone's DMARC, based on email DNS settings, right? No one used to talk about that or even, think about that. In fact, most people in the world of technology, when you hear DMARC, you're thinking, oh, that's the handoff point of my circuit down in my telecom closet, which is still true. But now there's another definition behind that, and it's related to how your email is configured and set up. And if you don't pay attention to some of those little pieces, now your brand reputation could be in jeopardy. Somebody spoofing your domain without your knowledge, sending email as your organization to maybe your existing customer list or your competition. Who knows what could come from those types of exploits? But the idea is Mimecast is staying ahead of it.
Yeah, the domain message authentication reporting, DMARC, like you said, in the same report that I was reading, they said that 91% of companies are getting spoofed, and 44% of those are seeing a rise in this type of fraud. So, um, DMARC is probably going to help mitigate that. So that's a good point that you bring up, Scott. Now, I think this is one of the questions that a customer might have. So, what if a customer already has Mimecast or email protection from another vendor? Is there anything else that we could offer that could be of value?
Without a doubt, we can bring them under the Evolve IP umbrella. From the standpoint of, a simpler support mechanism alone, right? You have one number if you're working with us to call for your support needs. You would utilize that same process to reach out for Mimecast help. Not only that, we've got certified Mimecast engineers on staff, right? Those would be the Mimecast warriors. And we leverage those folks as the first pass on resolution. So you've got, kind of think of it as like super ninjas, super experts on our team, able to help. If they can't figure anything through that process, we can reach up to Mimecast and leverage their expertise. So you've kind of got two tiers of help from us. You've got that simpler support process, one number to leverage. We have, the ability to put it all in one invoice for you, and our ability to roll it out and configuration assistance is something that you would get from us that you wouldn't probably see going it alone.
I think there's also a benefit too as a consumer, right, of a holistic approach to these types of security solutions. So Mimecast, with all of the features and functionality and capabilities that platform has, still being a single piece of a larger puzzle that also includes a number of other considerations that align themselves to an organization's defense or securability or security. So coupling email security with things like a cloud-based intrusion detection and prevention system of a customer's hosted network, being able to do both proactive and reactive antivirus solutions for a customer's server environment, their IaaS environment, extending that into their end user computing environment, being able to do containerized end user computing that isolates where people are doing their work from the underlying devices that they're using on a daily basis, and then layering all of that stuff on top of an IT resilience suite that includes things like the ability to back up all of these things, whether they're prem-based, whether they're cloud-based, whether they're SaaS-based in some cases, like being able to back up Office 365 utilities or resources. And being able to have recoverability from that from a business continuity perspective of, like we talked about, like business, platform differentiation, right? Replication between data centers of cloud hosted resources. So, the email security piece, again, is kind of the tip of the iceberg in a larger overall defense strategy discussion. But being able to work with a partner who is really well versed across the different variety of those different solutions and how they lend themselves to a unified approach to organizational security, I think can really have its advantages. I think of it all the time as, think of a bank, right? You go into a bank and you have a vault. That vault has a nice, real big, hardy, secure door that locks, that you have your most valuable things in there. And that bank has, an alarm system on their doors and windows, and they have locks, and they have cameras, and they have all these things, right? It's all about being able to secure that environment, secure where those valuables are stored. But what else does every bank that you walk into, at least here in the U.S., have? FDIC insurance. And why? Because there's the possibility that despite all of their best efforts, all of those means that they have of protection might end up proving insufficient for someone looking to gain access to those valuables illicitly. So that's really what that's the in-depth part of the defense in-depth conversation, right? Like, how can we put you in the best possible position to protect the things that you want to protect? But if that protection, for whatever reason, still ends up proving ineffective, be able to recover from whatever it is that occurred with minimal downtime, minimal interruption.
So we talked about a lot of stuff right now, and is there anything that we might not have touched upon, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me it's interesting because so much of the conversation, again, around email security specifically, is all like from the outside in, right? We always think about, hey, how can I put up a fence that keeps away the things that I want to keep away? And we don't think about that fence also functioning to keep inside the things that we want to keep in, right? So much of the conversation is a one-way street of protecting attackers from gaining access into our environment, And I feel like that leaves a very big unexplored conversation around how these solutions can also lend themselves to being a DLP solution, right? How can you help from a data loss prevention perspective? So again, Mimecast is a great utility there that has the ability for us to embed specific policies that can prevent things like sending privileged patient information that might contain social security numbers or medical records or credit card numbers for a PCI based organization from going out via email and via attachments. So it not only protects us from potentially having a bad actor on the outside looking to get in, but either through omission or commission, a bad actor on the inside looking to send things out that they necessarily shouldn't be. So I feel like that's a part of the conversation that often gets overlooked. That hey, look, that's equally as important as protecting ourselves from things gaining access that we don't want. We want to also make sure that we're ensuring that things that need to stay inside, privileged information, secure information, doesn't egress from our environments just as much as bad information ingressing into them.
Sure. No, I think I just want to reinforce some of the human element that is involved there. What Kevin was talking about. Hey, we don't want to send PII out the door, right? Credit card numbers out the door. And there's products within the Mimecast suite that address that, right? But then there's also that earlier part I was talking about where, hey, I got an important, looks like a very urgent email from our CFO asking us to release, payment for a certain thing, and it's time sensitive. So in a panic, all right, I'm going to send that over to my boss or a couple of people on my team that, hey, how do we handle this, right? Next thing I know, I've now shared a virus with a few people internally, right? So what Mimecast is conscious of is that human element of panic of, do I need to pause and think about this? Do I bring internal IT into these circumstances, right? And through their training and expertise with an awareness training product that they have, they bring people up in that intelligence level of looking at all of those little factors that come into them so that they can make a better human judgment of, do I pass this along? Do I freeze and let it in my inbox and alert someone in a separate way? These are all, again, those enhanced exploit pathways that the bad actors are utilizing. And so it necessarily isn't a software-based piece of protection, but it's a human behavior-based protection. And those get attention from Mimecast, where I think a lot of others really, you'll see some articles here or there, best practices, things like that. But when you're getting a module deployed to your employees once a month on a different facet of those attack vectors that then rate and score and report on how your organization is doing, I think that takes it to a whole nother level, and the kind of level that we like to see and impart on our customers.
Yeah, and I don't think you can oversell the importance of security awareness training, right? The nicest way I can think to say it is you're only as strong as you are at your weakest moment. So that's certainly true when it comes to these types of solutions. Because look, like I'll be honest, I probably shouldn't share this, but I myself have nearly fallen victim to one of these types of attacks because you find yourself at an event or head down working in something, and you get an email from a high ranking official within your organization that, as far as you can tell, looks perfectly legitimate, asking you to do something, right? And in my case, fortunately, the thing that they were asking me to do is go out and buy iTunes gift cards. So of course I'm not going to do that for a board member of our organization. But look, that's how these things happen, right? Like it's
Right.
it's not that people don't know better. It's just that these attacks, they have the benefit of numbers on them, that you can attempt this against 1 million people and you only need one to actually bite for the attack to have been effective, right? So if you email every single accounting organization in the country across all of their departments, asking all of them to wire a certain amount of money to a bank account, that only has to work one time for that attack to have been fruitful. So just constantly doing that security awareness training and reminding folks that these threats are out there, these things exist, they're real, and also that we're not immune to them, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to look at these things in the news and think like, man, I can't believe someone fell for that. But again, you're only as strong as you are at your weakest moment. So if you're up against a deadline and trying to run to get something done and balancing work and picking up your kids from school, and like, you just never know where you're going to find yourself when that message comes in for you specifically. So constantly reinforcing that these tools exist, how these tools work, doing tests against your users to make sure that you simulate a phishing attack or a spear phishing attack to see what happens. Not that you're looking to point the finger at those people and cast aspersions or blame upon them, but to then be able to have the opportunity to do some additional training, additional education to help the folks that specifically might need it in your organizations as well.
I love the reference of the human element and awareness training, because now that we have AI, it's become even more difficult to really differentiate between everything. Like, sure, businesses and customers have access to AI, but even the hackers have access, the cyber criminals have access to AI. So, uh, the lack of that governance is always going to make it even more difficult to differentiate between all these phishing attacks and spoofing and things like that. So,
Yeah, and deep fake technology is only going to make that even harder, right? Like, you hate to take kind of a pragmatic view of it, but the reality is, I think we're on the precipice of an AI arms race where the bad actors are out there already leveraging artificial intelligence to figure out more effective ways of attacking us, and now we're finally at least starting to see the industry look to also leverage it, artificial intelligence capabilities of how to defend us against those specific attacks, and that scale will go back and forth over the next few years while we all collectively figure it out together.
okay. No, thank you, Kevin and Scott. This has been really insightful. Hopefully, it helped answer some of the questions that our customers would have when thinking about email protection, platform continuity, and security. So, thank you.
Yeah,
You're
so
welcome.
so it's a very long way of saying the answer to your question is yes. You probably should have email security somewhere in your organization.
And no matter if you're an IaaS, DaaS, UCaaS, CCaaS, email is everywhere. So we should be selling it to anybody that we know is not protected, because at the end of the day, we're only helping ourselves to prevent a larger issue and keep things running smooth both for the customer and their employees.